welcome and thank you so much for coming. I'm very excited to have you here about this very exciting topic, which is anti-aging. How many people here want to get old? Nobody, but we all want to live for a really long time. So it used to be that we believed that living for a long time meant automatically that you got old, but we have a different understanding of biological aging these days. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the goal is to live for a long time without getting old. And when we talk about aging, we want to talk about function. And we want to understand that aging really is nothing more than a deterioration in function, which is the same thing as a deterioration in health. And as we understand it in this office especially, health is the same thing as function. Health is when everything works that is supposed to work. And so it is with aging. So when we can maintain the function longer, then we can also put off aging. We'll talk about some broad mechanisms and some very, very specific mechanisms and details that they've discovered lately. And also in this office, when we talk about function, we understand that we're talking about the brain. Because in the body, everything that happens in the body is a result of the regulation of the brain. There is no body part that operates independently of the brain. There's not a single cell that does not depend on the brain's regulation for its health and function. So again, when we're talking anti-aging, we want to talk about all of the factors that help the brain maintain its function. So the first cartoon. At your age, people get anxious about taking so many pills, but I can prescribe something for that. So that's the mentality that we want to get away from. That there are no magic bullets. There are no magic pills. All a pill does is to cover up a symptom and make the function get worse, to keep the deterioration going. So over the years, they have produced a very large number of aging theories. It's something that mankind has been very, very obsessed with for a very long time. Because we're afraid of aging, we're afraid of dying, so we want to stick around and we want to stay young. So one theory is that aging is due to stress, simply wear and tear. Another theory talks about free radical damage, and free radicals are counteracted by something called antioxidants. So if we're deficient in antioxidants, then the free radicals take the upper hand and we age faster. There's theories of genetic damage and mutations. There's theories of hormonal changes. There is theories of mitochondrial degeneration, because the mitochondria, which we'll have a separate talk about, they are the little things inside your cells that make energy. And everything in your body runs on energy, so if the energy declines, then that affects all functions in the body. So mitochondrial degeneration would speed up aging, and they have noticed with people who are older have less functional mitochondria. Then there's some guy called Hayflick, and he found out that cells can only divide so many times before they die. So that he came up with the Hayflick limit, and he found that approximately 50 times is the maximum number that a cell can divide, and then it just won't do it anymore. So all of these aging theories are partially correct. Every one of them can be validated, and you can compare, you can see that, okay, well, this causes that, and this correlates with that. So every one of them is correct. The interesting part now is the discovery called telomeres, which we will touch on today, and then we'll have a separate talk exclusively for that. Because telomeres explain and correlate and tie together all the other aging theories. And that makes it very, very exciting. It was so exciting, in fact, that they awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the mechanism of telomeres and something called telomerase. We'll get to that. So in 2009, they called it the greatest discovery ever concerning aging and the aging mechanism. It's like we finally figured out how that stuff works. These discoveries have given us glimpses of the possibility of slowing and even reversing aging. Now that's a big concept to swallow. Reversing aging means getting younger than you were before. That's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it is an actual possibility. Aging is not as inevitable as we have thought. It's just a built-in mechanism, and now we're starting to understand that mechanism. So the new understanding is that how many years you have left doesn't depend just on how long you've lived here. It depends on how much do you have left of your telomeres. So telomeres are like the little protective caps on shoelaces. So you have, here's a chromosome, and the chromosome winds up, and they look like this, basically. And on here are billions and billions and billions of nucleotides making up genes. But at the end here, we'll make it look like a shoelace. This is not what it looks like. But here is a protective cap. So built into the mechanism, every time that a cell divides, then the chromosome splits down the middle and it makes a copy of itself along with the cell. But because of something built into the chromosome, because of the mechanism that it duplicates, it is not possible to duplicate 100% of the chromosome. There's always some loss. There's always a portion of the end that gets wasted. So in order for cells to be able to divide at all, because they knew this already, the people who discovered the DNA sequence, they said this doesn't make sense, because if you can't duplicate the whole chromosome, it should be able to replicate even once and still be functional. But what they found out, and what the Nobel Prize was for, was the exact structure and function of this. So what this is, it is essentially, if you want to call it, junk DNA, meaning it is DNA, but it doesn't code for anything. It has no purpose except being there and taking up space. But because it does that, the body can waste a little bit of it every time, and it doesn't affect the information encoded in the genome. So it's a brilliant mechanism. However, at conception, these are as long as they will ever be. And they have figured out it's about 15,000 base pairs, 15,000 units of telomere. By the time you're born, your cells have already divided a bunch of times, so you're down to about 10,000.
All right, let me check, and then I'll call you right back.
And then, by the time they reach 5,000, and nobody knows exactly why, but at that point, the telomere is so short that the cell goes into what's called senescence, meaning it won't divide anymore. So our lifespan is essentially, from conception to birth, we go from 15 to 10,000, and while we're walking around on the planet, we go from 10,000 to 5,000. And that's our lifespan. So what we want to do then, all of these other aging factors are about how quickly does the telomere shorten. So if you can stop wearing down the telomere, you can stop aging completely.
As
Sure.
because I kind of missed that, the 5,000 stands for what period in your life you have the 5,000?
When you die.
Oh, when you die, you still have
Yes.
5,000.
Yes.
Okay.
At that point, the cells just become dysfunctional and they won't divide anymore. So now, this study of aging becomes so much simpler because everything correlates back to this mechanism. So now we can still study brain and nutrition and exercise and all that, but it takes out a lot of guesswork because all we have to do is to see how does it affect the telomere. And if it wears down the telomere quickly, it's bad for you. If it wears it down slowly or not at all, it's good for you. So now we're going to step back a little bit from that and look at some really big questions. So what is life? What is a life form? What is it that's different about something that's alive versus a rock or a grain of sand or a snowflake or whatever? And something that's alive, a life form, is something that can respond to its environment. It needs some kind of detection system. Secondly, it needs to be able to create energy because nothing runs without energy. That means it needs to take some form of carbon and oxidize it and make carbon dioxide. That's what all life forms on Earth do. And then, if it wants to live more than a very, very short time, it needs to be able to reproduce. It needs to make copies of itself and then eventually some offspring. So all of these things are common to what we call life. And in order to pull this off, it needs 6 little things here. And I'll just rattle them off and we'll get into the details later. We need a brain and a nervous system. We need a blueprint, that's the DNA. We need a plan on how to put proteins and cells together. We need building blocks. You can't build a house without bricks. You can't build life forms without building blocks. Then we need stimulation, the reason, because nothing happens without a reason. Nothing happens without stimulation. We need energy, and then we need an elimination system, because everything that's alive, from the very basic cells, when you metabolize something, you create waste, and that waste has to get out somehow. So these are the basic steps of what's required for life. So those are the 6 things required by life. And aging is a functional decline in any of the above because that affects the telomeres. So let's expand a little bit on that in terms of what does the body need. And now we're not talking so much about any life form, we're more focused on humans now. Number 1, we need stimulation. That's activation of the nervous system. That is primarily movement, but it's also any of the 5 senses, and I put in parentheses thinking, because it is important, but it's not the main thing that the brain does. Most people believe that that's all the brain does, and it's a very tiny portion, but it is still important. But stimulation is huge. Then the blueprint, that's your DNA, and in order for that DNA to work, we need to have adequate DNA repair. The body has mechanisms to repair it, and if that happens properly, then you'll have less degenerative disease and so forth. And it's not all about which genes you have, it's which genes do you express. Because you have a whole bunch of genes that you will never express, but it's your environment and your lifestyle that determines which ones you will express. Building blocks. We need bricks and mortar. So that's the proteins and the fats and the minerals. They make up the bulk of the materials. But then there's also the most important fats are DHA and EPA. And those are the two things that are in high quality fish oil. That's why we talk so much about everyone should take fish oil. If you don't, you start today and never stop. DHA, which you only get a few hundred milligrams from a good quality fish oil, is 40% of the bulk of your brain consists of DHA. And 50% of every cell membrane, that's every cell membrane on 100 trillion cells in your body, is 50% DHA. And since the cell membrane is responsible for the signaling and the communication, it determines what's inside and outside the cell. That's hugely important. And the DHA and the quality of that cell membrane depends largely on the quality of the fats making it up. 60% of your retina is DHA, so vision also depends on it. Then EPA is not so much a building block. It is a precursor, but it's a precursor for prostaglandin 3, which makes it a very, very important anti-inflammatory. It's the body's most important natural anti-inflammatory. It's what balances things out in the body. And what they have found, which we'll get into in another talk, is virtually all degenerative disease is related to a chronic state of inflammation, much due to toxicity. So the EPA here will counteract some of that inflammation. Energy is generated in mitochondria. We'll draw a little picture for you. Not that it will be very impressive, but it will give you an idea. So here's a cell, and here's the nucleus, and in the nucleus you have all the chromosomes. We'll put a few more X's so it doesn't look like a dead guy. And then in here you have these little things that looks like rice grains or something. They are mitochondria. They are the energy factory. It's the powerhouse of the cell. Without the mitochondria, you would lose 95 to 98% of all your energy. So as we age, we get fewer of these, and our energy production goes down, and that's one of the most important factors of aging. And if we can boost the number and function of mitochondria, we can reverse a lot of the effects of aging. The energy that this guy makes is called ATP, and don't worry too much about all these terms, we'll get back to them. But I thought I'd throw them in just for completeness. ATP is the energy currency in the body. You don't use calories, you use ATP. That's the final form of energy that you're using. And in order to make energy, you also need vitamins, and you need coenzyme Q10. There's a lot of talk about this thing called CoQ10. CoQ10. And the reason is, this is a molecule, it's an enzyme that is manufactured by the mitochondria, by the cell. It is used by the mitochondria. And if you don't have enough CoQ10, you can't make ATP. So one of the reasons that the function of mitochondria decline is that the level of CoQ10 declines. So we want to do some things to protect the mitochondria, but then we want to add back some CoQ10 to make sure that we have the fuel that they need, the catalyst that they need to make ATP. And if we are above 35 years old, we need a special form of CoQ10, which is the active form, and that's called ubiquinol. So if you're going to buy it, then look for the ubiquinol. The CoQ10 works for people who are under 35. If you're over 35, you definitely want to get the ubiquinol. And just as a little parentheses on how detrimental some drugs can be, one of the most popular drugs right now is cholesterol drugs, statin drugs. And because statin drugs act by inhibiting and interfering with the liver, they destroy CoQ10. So I would never recommend anyone to get on a statin drug, but if you did, then you want to definitely take large amounts of CoQ10 with that to offset some of the effects. And then the body, like we said, it needs an elimination system. So every cell has its own little detoxification system, and then we have kidneys and liver to help out along with that. Because, like we said, everything that you burn in the body creates waste products, and today we need a detox system for much more than waste products. We need it for all the toxins that we have in our environment. So the elimination system is hugely important, and in addition to that, we can help it out with antioxidants and with doing a cleanse every now and then. So we'll be getting back to that. Aging factors. So what are the factors of aging? Well, if we only have so many copies to make, then aging is limited, or an aging factor is anything that limits the number of copies. So if some part of our lifestyle makes us only be able to make 40 copies instead of 50, then that just shortened our life. And that again depends on the length of the telomeres and the protective caps like we talked about. A huge factor is toxins and free radicals, because they get in the way of this machinery. Number two, anything that interferes with the clarity of the copy. So if you imagine that you have a document and you put it on your Xerox machine and you run a copy, and then you take the copy and you put it back as the original and you run another copy, and you run another and another and another. If you have a really good copier, you might be able to do that 50 times. If you have a bad copier, after 10 copies, or if you try to send a fax more than 3 times, you can't read it because there's so much distortion. So anything in your body cell that sort of distorts or destroys the quality of the copy is going to shorten your life. And again, toxins and free radicals are probably the #1 factor there. I talk too much. It looks so short on my notes, and then it just expands.
No, it's passion, right? That's passion.
Yeah. So when we talk about the DNA, then we have both the factors, the toxins and free radicals, which destroys the DNA, but the body also has the mechanism to repair the DNA. So if that isn't working properly, then you sort of have two forces against each other. So we need to have both a reduction in free radicals and a proper repair mechanism in order for the DNA to work properly generation after generation of cells. And then anything that speeds up the rate of copying, if you're going to make a copy every week instead of every month, then that's going to make you run out of copies much faster. And what are some of the things that speeds up the copying? Well, stress. Burning your candle at both ends. Secondly, sugar. Huge, huge, huge. Sugar is about the only thing that isn't a toxin that will do this. And sugar is called a mitotic, or sugar actually stimulates insulin, but insulin is called basically a cell dividing hormone. It's a storage hormone, and it speeds up the rate of cell division. And then toxins and free radicals. So as you can see, toxins, free radicals, they come back at every step of the process here. And one of the reasons that what we talk about is so important and why supplements become so important, it's not just to replace what's been missing in the food, but it's to counteract and offset all of the toxins that we have. They have in this last century or so, there's I think about 85,000 chemicals and toxins that have been used and released in the atmosphere and in the food and so forth. The average person at any given time has more than 700 toxins in their bodies that don't belong there. So that may be the single biggest reason that we need to take some extra supplements and to take more than what seems reasonable just to kind of balance this out. And then any factor, an aging factor is any factor that reduces or interferes with energy production. And you can pretty much repeat some of the same factors. So now that we understand sort of what wreaks havoc, then anti-aging becomes anything that reverses or compensates for this. The number one thing we want to do is stress reduction. Here we have chiropractic adjustments, like what we talked about before, that new to you why that is a stress reduction, but the chiropractic adjustment is an interruption to patterns running in your system. So as we respond to the stress, we get stuck in different patterns. And one of the most powerful ways that chiropractic works is to interrupt those patterns and give the body a reset, if you will. Meditation is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself, and exercise. Exercise is also about activation and stimulation and pattern interrupts. So all of these things help stress reduction. And then toxin elimination, obviously reduce the amount of processed foods and junk food and things that you know have toxins in them. Unfortunately, fish belongs in this category today. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most beautiful foods ever found on Earth, and now you're not supposed to eat it anymore. You eat it if you like, but not once in a while, but not because it's good for you, because there's so much heavy metals and contaminants in there. And then you want to assist the body, assist the elimination system with doing some cleanses. And number 3 here, I touched on that, supplements that restore and assist the body. So first we want to make sure that we get the quality building blocks that we need, and especially essential fatty acids. Those are the ones that most people are so deficient in. because they are destroyed with food processing, and we need more of them as soon as we have inflammation and stress. We need antioxidants to counteract the free radicals. So we'll have a whole talk on free radicals and antioxidants. And the king of antioxidants is called glutathione. And that's the antioxidant that's manufactured inside the cells. And that becomes important because it's the most important one, but it's intracellular, which means that you can't get it from the outside of the cell to the inside, meaning you can't eat it. Because the body, if you eat glutathione, the body takes it apart first.
So you can't get it through a supplement.
Indirectly, I'm getting at that. But the mechanism is different than something like vitamin C or something that you just eat it and you have it. But glutathione, the body takes it apart. So what you want to do is you just want to eat the part that is the hardest to get. And then your body has the components to build it up again. And it's on the list of supplements, but the most important one is called cysteine. It's an amino acid. And the form that has the highest absorbability is called N-acetylcysteine. And then you want to take some supplements to support energy production, which means mitochondrial support. We already talked about CoQ10 or ubiquinol. That's the main one, but there are some others that you're doing, not so much like CoQ10, but that you're doing to protect the mitochondria. And glutathione is huge, but there's some other antioxidants and some other factors as well. And then just finish up and talk a little bit about the brain influences on telomeres, because a lot of this stuff is about the biochemistry and what happens at the cellular level. But being in a brain-based office here, we want to definitely emphasize that the brain's behavior, and now we're talking sympathetic, parasympathetic, we're talking stress responses. So when we know that stress is detrimental, we're really talking about brain function, because stress is about how the body, how the nervous system responds to stress. So the sympathetic response is the fight-flight response, and the more of it we have, the more we speed up the shortening of telomeres. So stress, tension, upset, degeneration, low energy production, catabolism, which means that you break things down rather than build things up, and detrimental exercise, meaning exercise that you do at such a level that your body doesn't have the time or resources to recover. So all of these things will result in a sympathetic dominance and will speed up the shortening of the telomeres. On the other side is all the stuff that we want to try to do more of, which is to get into the relaxation response, the parasympathetic response. And these are habits that have to do with peace, relaxation, meditation, regeneration, healthy mitochondria. It's about anabolism and repair. And there is also beneficial exercise. So all of these things, this is just the overview on anti-aging. So we'll come back to all of these topics, and we'll have 5 or 6 more workshops where we'll talk about the details of all these things. So we know that stress is not a good thing, and the cartoon here says, "Honey, when you left for the office this morning, you were a happy, vibrant, enthusiastic 25-year-old. You want to talk about it?" That's what stress will do to you. So what can we do as individuals? We're just, like I said, laying the framework here, but number one, be willing to learn. Understand that there's no easy fix for anything, and in order to stay motivated, we have to know why. We have to have the big picture, otherwise we're never going to stick with anything.
Mhm.
2, get adjusted, because chiropractic is one of the most powerful ways to interrupt the stress response. And we're probably going to start doing a test shortly that measures something called thiol, which is a measurement of DNA repair. So what they found was people that had been adjusted for more than a year or a year and a half, they were astronomically better off in terms of DNA repair than the average person. 3, lifestyle. Learn how to eat better, move better, feel better. 4, supplements. If it's missing or declining, we have to add it back. And the reason I express it that way is there's lots and lots of good supplements around. But if you go into a health food store, or if you open up a supplement catalog, all they're going to talk about is take this pill for this symptom. So they're no better than a drug pusher in their mentality, in their mindset. The allopathic system, the pharmaceutical system, says if you have this symptom, you take this drug for it. And if you take supplements the same way, you're just taking a natural drug instead of an artificial one.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're way better off, but we need to change the mindset. We're not trying to suppress symptoms, we're trying to get things to work so that the body never expresses symptoms, because they're only a result of something that isn't working. And that's one of the main things that we're trying to accomplish in this office and with these talks, is for people to understand that health is when everything works the way it's supposed to work. And then we don't have to worry about disease. There is no place for disease if everything is working. And I see if I can remember him on my wall back here. It says, you can no more create health by suppressing symptoms than you can create light by covering up the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's the same principle. We're not trying to take something for something. If it's missing, we'll add it back because it's required. That's it. Exercise. Exercise is about maximizing HGH, which is human growth hormone. It's a fantastically rejuvenating hormone, and we can make it ourselves, but we make it with a very specific form of exercise, which is extreme high intensity exercise. And it's so intense that you only want to do it for a few seconds every week, but that's enough. So we'll talk about how that works. And you want to reduce your toxic burden. So you learn how to eat cleaner, and then you learn how to support your body with some cleanses. And those are just a good idea to do periodically. So thank you very much for your attendance and attention. Do we have any questions?